So thank you for coming today. We are WordWise Learning, and I'm excited to spend the next 30 minutes showing you what we're working on and then sharing our experiences with using it and testing it in gifted and talented classrooms. So let's start off with a little introduction. WordWise Learning is a technology startup that's headquartered right here in Bozeman. We're focused on U.S. education market, and we're self-funded, meaning that we don't have outside money from investors or other entities, which also means that there's no shadowy figures pulling strings. What you see here is what you get. Our product is called Tall Tale Club, and it focuses on developing reading skills primarily, and it's out there right now at talltaleclub.com. So we're a very small team of two, and we're all here today. I'm Andy. Morning, everybody. And I'm here with my co-founder, Jack. He's going to throw water at me if I go over, keep me on task. Okay, we're going to begin this session by introducing you to Tall Tale Club, and then we're going to talk about how we used it in Gifted and Talented. So it is a classroom-focused tool that enables students to create their own at-level reading materials, and it's powered by some cutting-edge generative AI. Now, I like to explain something new and novel by comparing it to things we know or are familiar with. So for Tall Tale Club, I describe it as choose your own adventure style mechanics, book mechanics, combined with the unbounded flexibility and imagination of Dungeons and Dragons. And then on top of that, we sprinkle in some illustration magic, and that gives you Tall Tale Club. So why are we here? I think it's an important question to answer up front, both at a high level and then specifically why I'm here today. At a high level, the company's goal is to help students improve their reading skills and maybe more importantly, to make them love reading while doing so. And we want to do this in the most inclusive way possible so that both the lowest achieving and highest achieving students in any classroom are engaged in improving their individual skills, all within a coherent activity that the entire class is engaged in. So why am I here today? Pretty simple, and it's not to sell you anything. We're new, and we want to enable you for free to test and try this in classrooms and in your schools. This software gets better the more people who use it and the more we learn from it. So I want everyone to be convinced to go home and give this a try and discover ways, both that I think and ways I haven't thought of, that this can make a positive impact in classrooms with students. And I also want to connect and learn. So Jack and I are not educators, we're tech people. That brings some skills, but there's some definite things we're lacking. So connecting and talking with educators and see what they do is really what guides what we create and what this becomes. Okay, I want to be transparent and build trust. I don't want to get you excited and mentally invested in something that turns out to be just prohibitively expensive for any standard classroom budget. So we're not that. We're expecting that it will be somewhere between 120 and 180 per classroom for a year in order to cover the cost of this type of technology that powers it. Although we will always have a free tier that is available to classrooms, and we're working on strategies to make that as generous as possible, and we'll be hopefully becoming more generous over time. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit of the reason that led us to creating Tall Tale Club. We believe that there's a very big barrier to reading engagement, and it's due a lot to reading achievement, and it's due to engagement and motivation issues. At a population level, there's a significant achievement problem that's very well measured and documented. Only 32% of fourth graders and 29% of eighth graders can read at a proficient level for their grade. So that means that 70% are reading below proficient. I mean, in other words, they're failing at where they are expected to be. There's also a very real challenge within individual classrooms that I don't think is talked about very much. Do you guys know what the average gap is between the highest achieving and lowest achieving student when it comes to reading in the average American classroom? Any guesses? I'm not surprised because I can't find data about this. I don't know specifically either. I'm looking for this, but a lot of studies look higher level and not at the day-to-day gap that there is. So I've got a survey out there. It's got very few responses. So next time I give this, it might have actual data with some confidence to it. But the few that have come back are showing about a 4 grade level difference. Does that surprise anybody?
I was going to say, within our classrooms, we see that's...
Yeah, within a classroom. So that's a challenging spread for even the best teacher in the country, and yet every educator is dealing with that every day. Okay, lastly, there's a measured engagement problem too when it comes to reading. The most poignant data point I've found is that there's been a 32% decrease in reading for fun over the last decade. Coincidentally, Netflix streaming launched in 2007, which means students born that year would be entering kindergarten at approximately 2012. Possible coincidence? Maybe not. So this leads us to hypothesize that reading achievement and reading engagement are directly related. So what are we doing about it? So Tall Tale Club aims to upgrade the student reading experience by adopting the modern trends and meeting their expectations for what students are now used to. So let's stop in fighting technology. Let's embrace it. Netflix and its peers have conditioned students to expect unlimited choice. From an entertainment standpoint, you can now find basically content on any topic you can imagine, and you can find it instantly. And it's now interactive too. Games and now even TV shows allow you to explore and to choose your own path. So we can give students these exact same experiences for reading, and we can do so and make it educational at the same time. So I'm going to give a super quick lightning demo of what that means in a product that someone's using in their classroom, and then we're going to shift and talk more about specifically gifted and talented. What you see up in front of you is Tall Tale Club. We're kind of looking at the student experience, and it's all about creating your own story. So what we're going to see is a choose your own adventure style, very simple experience that ends up with students doing a ton of reading as part of it and becoming very engaged. So for this, I've left more choice for us. As a teacher, I might have chosen some of these things ahead of time, but a story for us starts with a genre. We've got a bunch in there for them to choose that sort of slightly guides the story into what it's going to become. I'm going to choose fiction because it's rather open-ended. I'm going to talk more about illustrations, but it's a large part of the experience and how we get kids engaged. So with us generating and creating illustrations, there's styles to keep it consistent. I'm going to pick quickly from one of ours that we just put out there called Abstract April. So it's a little bit more of an abstract style. Okay, characters have stories and settings. So that's the first thing generally a student's going to pick. A lot of the experience is they are choosing from choices imagined and for them, but there's also flexibility for them to create their own, which many students do choose to do. For us, we've got 3 choices, and I'm going to pick the middle one. Mr. Patel, an analytical patient and enjoys challenging students with advanced curriculum. Kind of sounds appropriate for today. Setting, it also imagined choices that I'm picking from. For students, it's often forests or castles or something like that. For us, since we're teachers, these are focused on some in-school scenarios. So let's pick, we are a colorful, cozy classroom decorated with posters and books located in a small town in the United States. So now the more fun part happens. And this is where the reading and engagement really begins. First page is being started for us, as long as my internet in this hotel is good. And I have it set to a fairly high reading level. Actually really high. So what I'm seeing is I have it set to a high reading level, so this is a lot of reading. I should have chosen something smaller for this demo, hindsight. For a second grader, it'd be much smaller. For a third grader, slightly more and a little bit harder words. The basic experience is a student gets 3 choices. They read them and choose which one they want. Alternatively, they can provide a suggestion. Let's, for us, say the day starts with coffee and a scone. So I could have chosen something generated. I could have guided it, and I'm going to get 3 new choices that are closer topically to what I wanted as they come out. Here we go. Mr. Patel is now steaming his morning coffee, enjoying the hum of the classroom. Alternatively, I can edit and take what was started and fix it to what I want, or I can just absolutely write my own if something's not happening. So for speed, because this is a lightning demo, I'm going to choose that path, and my next task is to illustrate what is happening. Now we paint with words, and that's what we demo and teach to kids. You have to understand the story and comprehend what's going on in order to describe the image you want for that page. So for me, I've got a teacher in his classroom. Enjoying a cup of coffee. I hit the magic button, and words, very simple words, are going to get transformed into an image at the style we chose. Not too bad. Looks like he's enjoying his cup of coffee. Now, that was pretty good. Let's say I want an apple on his desk to be cliche. I'm going to try again. I get 3 choices because we limit it, because if you can imagine, some students might spend all day doing this, and we want them to progress and read. And we got an apple on our desk. I'm going to choose that one. So repeat. Get 3 more choices driven by what's happened before, whether that was something they chose or something they wrote, and continue that process where a lot of times they're reading all 3 options, creating more, and doing a whole lot of reading practice at the same time and becoming super engaged. Switch back because I'll pause briefly for any questions before I dive into more specific topics. Yes?
No, we noticed there was a little speaker, so it will actually read to them as well?
There is a mode that we can enable for students that need narration, that are maybe the lower achieving, so yes. Generally, we don't turn that on for the story creation process because we want kids to read, but if we need to remove a barrier or give an aid to a kid, that is in there, and it works very well. Yeah?
Just going off of that, would there be like talk to text if they wanted to generate like the searches that you're generating, or could you use that as well?
There is, it's built into the hardware they use.
Okay.
So it's, if the hardware supports it like an iPad or a Chromebook, then it's built in there and it works just as well as anywhere else. Okay, I'm going to continue. We can have more questions at the end. Okay, so what are we specifically trying to do with this platform and that very simple experience? One, we want to enable an experience tuned to every single student, but still part of a coherent classroom activity. And then 2, we want to make everything more fun and engaging. So let's start with personalization. With a Tall Tale Club activity, educators have a ton of control at both the activity level and then at the classroom level to tune what you're doing. For some settings and options, you can delegate the choice to the student to make to give them more control or more flexibility. And others, you can choose to set and make fixed for the sake of curriculum coherence. So the potential of this is that you can have one topically consistent classroom activity that's enabling an equal challenge for all students across the ability spectrum through the application of aids or the removal of them and the application of more challenge. So let's talk about engagement. What powers engagement? Well, choice and voice are very important. This choice leads to ownership. That ownership really leads to engagement here. We power choice in the story creation process with a spectrum of capabilities. You saw a little bit of it, or I talked to it in that demo, where there can be near full autopilot, where students who struggle with imagination can just be choosing and still reading and experiencing and still crafting what they're creating as far as they're concerned, to full manual control where someone has such an idea in their head they have to get it out that they can just type it in. And then everything in between is sort of possible. So we can cover the full spectrum of students. And so with these options, we can enable all of them, highest to lowest, to become engaged and ultimately willingly reading. But this also leads to kind of an interesting contradiction when it comes to choice. Can we get more educational value by giving less choice? And from our pilots, we're finding that the answer to that is yes. So we launched Tall Tale Club and experimented with giving students nearly all control. And it worked really well, and it was really fun. But the stories could become anything. And that was a bit overwhelming for some. And so we started experimenting in the pilots with allowing educators to focus a story into something more specific. Meaning that they could define guardrails around characters, setting, and even plot to restrict it to something more topical related to the rest of what they were working on. So for example, restricting these stories that were created so that all of the characters were North American animals was one specific example. I'm going to talk more about this a little later in the presentation. So moving on with engagement, the illustration process itself, the painting with your words, leads to increased engagement and, like I said, comprehension as well. First off, those images they create, and here's some samples from some of our pilot classes, they're stunning. But to create these, the students have to understand the page they wrote in order to write what it's about. And we found they're highly motivated to do that. They want it accurate. So this is one of the ways we nudge them into ensuring they're reading. And then we also nudge them by limiting the amount of image attempts they get per page. And what I didn't show it on the last attempt, if I did the third one, there's a little inline mini quiz that takes the page content and generates a very simple comprehension check that they have to pass before they can do that last image. So what we've discovered is by doing that, we're accidentally teaching AI skills to some very young students. Success with AI is very much rooted in being able to provide context and very clear requirements to the AI engine so that it produces what you want. And that is exactly what is happening with those images and the iterations of it and refinement. So a little bit more discussion about that later. But for all the illustration engine's magic, the images are not always perfect. Sometimes they're hilariously wrong, but that's part of the fun of it. Take, for example, this lobster dog chimera monster. But we actually find it's part of the fun. These mistakes, they lead to increased engagement and collaboration. It motivates them to overcome the challenge, and they're so funny they want to share them with their peers and talk about it and learn together. Who else wants a lobster dog now after seeing that? Okay, so let's shift gears and talk specifically now about our tests with gifted and talented students, because there's some, we had a large bit of testing and it was interesting and sometimes different results. So we had the opportunity to try Tall Tale Club out with the 3rd through 8th grade gifted and talented programs at Montfort School in Four Corners. That's where my kids go. We do a lot of testing there just through opportunity. And so each of those individual grade groups spent 3+ weeks experimenting with Tall Tale Club. And the conclusion is they love it. The biggest frustration, though, was accuracy of the illustrations compared to what they wanted to see. The finding that we found was that universally, over time, they learned to do better. They collaborated, they experimented, they were challenged by it, and they worked until, by the end, they are much better at getting something they want. So I'm not going to share tips of how to do that. It's actually part of the fun discovery of finding how to AI whisper and get images. But repetition made them better. Related to images, students universally want more attempts. We currently limit to 3, and we do that so they don't get lost all day, because we want them to read. And 2, practical business standpoint, it is the most expensive part outside of narration of this process. So we limit them for that reason, although as costs come down, we want to hear feedback, whether 3 is the right amount, or if a bonus 4, if they do some gamification and answer a quiz is the right thing. But right now we're at 3, where that last one requires some work. I love that image. It was from a story someone wrote that was titled, Ilya and Ella Eat a Chicken. And it resulted in somehow that's part of the story, George Washington on wolves. Okay, there we go. An interesting trend we found that was different from general classrooms is that gifted and talented students, they showed an interest in creating what I'll call fan fiction stories. So for a higher percentage of them, it was rooted in something else they'd seen, and they were either augmenting or extending some movie or book or something else that they were super into, and exploring the sort of pre-established world of that. So funny story, one 4th grade student was super into the TV show Matlock, like the old one. Apparently there's a new one coming out, but she likes the old one, and decided to create a Matlock-inspired story within this. And the amazing thing is that we can support that. If that's what she's into and that's what she wants to read, I'm not going to stop her. She's still practicing her reading skills and very engaged in the process. If Andy Griffith drives engagement with 4th graders, then who are we to cast judgment? Another gifted and talented trend that was different was there was something about Stephen King's Pennywise that fascinates this group. And it was in a larger trend we saw of just macabre topics. And murderous clowns were a very popular group of that. I don't know what to make of this. It might just be a Montfortin thing. More data before we can understand. Next, so in a general classroom setting, a really large trend was that students injected themselves into the story. And they did that a lot. Whether the character just shared their name or whether they were literally the character. G&T students were a little different. We saw much more of them choosing what was imagined and going with that. I also don't know what to make of that either, but something that emerged that was noteworthy. Okay. So characters they didn't mess with, story content G&T students did. There was a much larger trend of them taking what was generated and editing it. And I don't remember how often, but I think it was more of the time than not, they would intersect themselves and edit and improve or change. And they started doing that after they discovered that what they changed would carry through and affect the rest of the pages. Because these aren't fixed paths. They're being imagined on the fly based on what came before. So when they discovered that, it set something off and started doing it more and got more engaged because of that. Okay. So isn't unique to gifted and talented, but the kids got the tool really fast after a quick demo. So technology barriers pretty low. They figure it out and it's pretty intuitive. The biggest amount of support needed from a teacher perspective, especially with the lower grades, was spelling. But even then, the students who are still developing their computer literacy skills learned and figure out how to use the built-in tools to fix spelling and do their best. So they became more autonomous at the same time. All right, so some specific recommendations, nearly straight from our teacher. 5 to 7 pages for the 3rd to 5th grade range, he said was perfect. It could go a little longer for older, but this process takes a little bit. 6 pages doesn't seem a lot, but they're doing a lot of reading and very invested in it. So you can fill an hour very easily with just 5 pages. Related to this, we added the capability to add an additional page if the story's not done. So if the student hits the last page and they're like, I've got more, they can keep the story going if there's time. 2, this is not a quiet activity. Students want to share and collaborate with the people next to them, and I think it should be encouraged. One thing that we also did with our pilots was we left time at the end of the activity for students to come up and present and read their books to the classroom. Saw huge engagement. Even the lowest, what I call the lowest achieving students, were super excited to share their story and would come up and read it to the class. And they do a really good job of it too. 3rd, this is a good segue, use curriculum topics from the main classroom in the activities you're doing. For the 6th graders at Montfortin, they were starting to study Greek gods and mythology. So the teacher focused the activities so that the characters were Greek gods and it was about their exploits and things. So what happened was it helped them sort of immerse and become more familiar with that topic while practicing their reading skills at the same time. And the last point is important because I think it really informs where we're heading with this platform. So we started out thinking that we were creating a tool for practicing reading skills, but I think we can be something much more. We'll still be that, but I think there's an opportunity to be a story-based learning platform and do it in a way that was never before possible. So important, what am I out of time? I'm at the end.
You're pretty much there.
Okay, I gotta wrap up. Where we are today, we can empower a story-based learning experience. It takes a little more clicks to do, but you have the power to focus an activity in a cross-disciplinary way using simple, plain English instructions so that the stories and activities created can be topically relevant to a theme or a lesson or a unit or an idea. So that then, even with STEM and history stuff, so then it becomes not only reading practice, but also capping off learning from other areas of the curriculum that are relevant to the class. And I'm out of time. So we're skipping safety and trust. And ending with, again, I want everyone to be convinced that this looks super fun and is worth experimenting in your classroom. I've got handouts of this so you can take the picture, or Jack over there has printouts. Either way is fine. The trial period is enough for the end of the year, and we can make it more generous if you really want to collaborate with us. And then in the future, there is a coupon code to make it practically free for a whole year. And thank you for the time today. We'll be sticking around through lunch if anyone's got questions, and I'll turn it over to Lindy for her part.
Thank you.
Thank you. 1 minute.